It's a Jonathan Hickman era of the Avengers, and now things are starting to move along pretty quickly. We've now worked our way in, if you're Marvel, to a period where you're relaunching the Avengers about every 3 years, 2 years, and it's a bold new status quo every time you do it. And when you do it, you've got to launch at least three, maybe more Avengers books. This would be called the Avengers era, and um, let's see how that goes. Hey everybody, this is Perch. Jonathan Hickman, Steve Epting launched New Avengers #1. They launched Avengers as well. I'm doing them in kind of an opposite order because New Avengers 1 had some plot points that would definitely feed into the other. But basically, any illusion that you could only read one title or another was shifted. In fact, I think at one point, I believe Hickman, although I could be remembering this wrong, was asked, could you just read one title or the other? And the answer was no, you really can't. And when we get into Infinity, that crossover, you can't read just one or the other. You have to read both, or the story makes absolutely no sense. But this had been happening for a while. When you had Fear itself and AVX interrupt the Avengers entirely, there's just no way you couldn't not. So basically, so right off the bat. Hickman is picking up on a storyline that had been introduced by Bendis around the Illuminati, the idea that several of the smartest, greatest minds would get together and decide to run the world in secret, or at least to protect the world from its plan. The entire Hickman run, which wound up being a really large run, culminating in Secret Wars, I guess, was kind of built on this premise that the heroes were doing maybe dark and deceitful things, and they're the Earth's protectors, but they're having to morally compromise themselves in order to save it. And so we get to kind of the table, and it begins with Reed Richards saying, "Everything dies, you, me, everyone on this planet, sun, the galaxy, eventually the universe itself. It's simply how things are. It's inevitable, and I accept it." 26 hours ago in Wakanda, some Wakanda people, not villagers, hunters, I guess, are come across a stone obelisk, and they are kind of investigating it, curious. They are interrupted by the Black Panther, who's kind of very proud of them and everything they've done, dreaming of the stars, dreaming of bigger things. A lot of Hickman's ideas around the Black Panther and Wakanda could be much bigger than what it is, that it could actually grow beyond the solar system, would be picked up by Ta-Nehisi Coates years later. But the idea that Wakanda could be sizable and impressive was a very big deal at the time. So basically a portal opens up. A rhino comes kind of charging out of it, and T'Challa decides he's going to see what's going on. He steps through this portal and discovers what looks like a planet colliding into a planet, and there is a unknown character there speaking an unknown language, and they are the kids kind of follow their way through, and they're doing something. We don't know what they're doing, but it's mysterious. It looks dangerous. And basically, it comes down where she is. This is an incursion. The lighting is weird. The planets are about to collide into each other. Looks like an Earth colliding into an Earth. So what does this mean? It means that these planets, these lives are colliding together. They have a conversation, but immediately then opens fire, murders the other Wakandans, and Black Panther manages to escape, sort of, back into his regular Earth. But not before there's a fight, not before there's a big mess, and we learn that the Black Swan character is basically kind of setting off a bomb in order to kill the world. It's not her world, but why is she doing this? She's trying to destroy a planet, and this basically ends this incursion. So Black Panther's not sure what to make of this, but he takes the information back to the Illuminati, so back to the King of Kings, the big thinkers, which include Namor, Reed Richards, Black Bolt, Doctor Strange, Iron Man, and Captain America. We don't have Professor X here. He's been killed at this point by the AVX storyline. And it lays out the premise of the comic. So this comic had a number of things. First of all, it's big concept from Hickman, and that's great. It also takes several reads to kind of really understand what's going on, and if you go back and read it, then it makes a lot more sense. If you're reading this in real time, month by month, a lot of this stuff was at times frustrating to kind of understand exactly what was happening here. But the New Avengers gets set up as a point to protect from an imminent global, all-destroying threat, which would be the Incursion. It's where these realities are collapsing in at an increased pace, and Earth is the focal point, and when it hits its kind of end point, all of reality gets destroyed. This would be the only purpose of the New Avengers book. It would be the entire reason for it kind of going on, and that ultimately would lead to time runs out, which would be the start of Secret Wars. So it was a bold book. It featured a lot of very kind of crazy things. It ultimately kind of stopped being about the Illuminati, these core characters I just mentioned, and a lot more about the kind of the Avengers in general and how they're going to handle this threat, and the battle between Steve Rogers and Tony Stark. So Tony Stark, at some point mind wipes Captain America from remembering, and then when he does remember, it sets off a huge battle, and S.H.I.E.L.D. takes control, and we're the heroes again, and it revisits a lot of topics from Civil War and other things. It plays out like a very dangerous story, a very crushing story, because we get Thanos, we get the whole Infinity storyline, we get heroes who are broken. It kind of very weirdly catches up with things that were going on in Axis at the time, like Tony Stark being flipped into a evil carrot version of himself. There's a lot of very unusual, very strange aspects to this story, and it's one of those things where you either love it or you hate it. And most of the time, the concept was really great. The way it played out was not necessarily the best. So I hear a lot of people talk about this comic and say things like they really love the idea, they didn't necessarily like the execution. And I think that's kind of a common thread here. The big bold idea was that the reality is going to be destroyed. It's the biggest threat. It's the Avengers cannot solve together, and all the books and everything Hickman kind of all pulls together with Avengers World and New Avengers, Illuminati, the regular Avengers. There feels like there's 3 or 4 more I'm forgetting in this mix around the Avengers. It was definitely universe changing, and Secret Wars interrupted pretty much all the titles, changed things forever, completely new status quo. And it was good. It's good for comics to do bold things. At the same time, one thing that was lost in this title is it never really felt like a Avengers book. It never really felt like its own title. It felt more like it was a plot device to kind of move this bigger storyline along. You couldn't pick up just New Avengers and read just this story and enjoy yourself. You had to go to the other Avengers books. You had to go to some of the other stuff Hickman was doing, or the story was just in too many pieces. Again, it provided a very stark look at what it means to be a hero, what it means to have, let's say heroes and villains, and compromises that people make. Reed Richards becoming a broken man, the Beast becoming more of a broken man, what they did with Iron Man, everything else. So there's definitely a sense of futility and finality about this book. So if you like that kind of dark, depressing, kind of more grim view, then this book was probably doing it really well for you. If you're looking for a classic Avengers book, it was not. And the other Avengers book was intended to be more the classic kind of Avengers title, but before long, it also kind of dove in to be inside this same storyline. I like Jonathan Hickman. I like a lot of what he does, but I fully understand why others don't, or where people struggle with him, and it's very clear just in this story. A lot of people will knock Brian Michael Bendis for being too wordy, but Hickman is as well. The difference is Hickman does more with kind of telling you the story, whereas Bendis talks the story to you. It's a subtle difference, but you'll notice that Hickman's throwing these giant concepts and certainly huge word bubbles and everything else out into the world, and kind of all the dialogue, but it still feels like the characters themselves, and it also feels like they're showing you a little bit more than telling you. And it's a style thing. Some people are into it, some people are not. It was definitely probably the most unique period of the Avengers as we'd get into this, because it set up not a heroic team and a not heroic team kind of simultaneously, and that was an interesting mix. But anyway, what did you think about this? Jonathan Hickman, the new Avengers, a bold new status quo, definitely doing a lot of things different. How did it work out for you? Were you a fan of the book? Did you continue it? What did you think of the bigger time runs out storyline and everything else? Did it capture you? Did it lose you? Let me know in your comments below. In your comments, yeah. Let me know with your comments in my comment field. You know what I'm saying. Like, subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Recommend to a friend. Always appreciate that. Follow me on Twitter @ComicPerch, and thanks for listening.